Welcome to AI, Anxiety, and the Future of Data Teams. I'm Moorman, and I didn't even want to pitch this talk. In May, we were in Slack noodling over Coalesce talk ideas. I pitched a couple, tried to get some feedback from my team, the marketing team. And then someone invited Barry, our lovely and brilliant CEO. And he took one look at my suggestions and DM'd me, no, it's data teams in the era of AI. And I said, no, I don't want to give that talk. To be honest, I didn't love working with AI. I was a bit skeptical about what it meant for my work life. And I frankly did not feel qualified to give that talk. So I pushed back, and after a couple more no's, and what felt like an eternity, but Slack tells me was 7 minutes, I gave in and I said yes, less because I wanted to give the talk, and more because I knew Hex's data team should give this talk here, and that we would have something to say. And I figured I had 5 months to figure it out. And then something really interesting happened. And over the next 4 months, everything changed. And when I sat down to make these slides, I was actually really excited about this talk. This is me in late August, the first time someone asked me to review an interaction with Threads, the chat agent inside Hex. It used the right table, it got the right answer, it raised a data quality concern, it did a quick check to make sure that was immaterial to its conclusion. It was right, it was pleasant to work with, and my colleague Julia got the answer she needed without having to loop in the data team at all. Whoa. I consider myself an AI skeptic, but here our agent was, leapfrogging everything I'd seen AI on top of a data warehouse do. It was doing a lot more, a lot sooner than I was expecting. And as cool as it was to see, my whole job is being an intermediary between the data and the business. So if a robot can do that, what exactly is going to happen to me? To all of us? To our teammates? How do I adapt? Or do I just cede my role to AI and go become a landscaper? So I'm going to take you on my accelerated journey through this. But a small spoiler, I'm actually more excited about my job right now than I have been in a long time. So before we jump in, why should you listen to me? As I mentioned, I'm Moorman. I've led a few data teams over the years. I'm an analytics engineer at Hex at the moment, but I was head of data for roughly the last 6 months through this time of wild change for our team. We kind of live in the future at Hex because we're dogfooding new features long before we make them available to our customers. So for the past 5 months, we've had access to our notebook agent and then Threads, our chat agent. And it's been really interesting. To give you a rough idea of scale, our data team is 5 people. Head of data, 2 analysts, 2 analytics engineers. But unlike most organizations, all 150 Hexans are editors. They're power users. They're building notebooks, digging into the data, and since we gave them agents to help them out, they're leaning way in. And it's been fascinating to see how it's gone. But it's also been a whole roller coaster of feelings. So I'm going to talk you through that roller coaster. How I thought AI was going to make me obsolete. How I thought AI was going to make my teammates obsolete. How I thought it was going to lead to utter chaos. And how I thought it would turn my work into something unrecognizable that I wasn't sure I wanted to do. And after all those twists and turns, I'm also here to tell you why I think our future might not be as bad as I feared. First, I thought AI was coming for my job. All the hype told me AI coding tools would simply automate away my work. And one day, our data team would be one person managing a whole fleet of agents. This one's been pretty easy to get comfortable with just by using AI more. We've leaned into AI tooling on the Hex data team for a long time, and for core data work, it's just not there yet. We see similar things to what we hear from engineers. It's not self-sufficient in a complex code base. It gets very confused a few layers deep into our spaghetti ball DAG, and it doesn't understand the business context it needs to make good decisions. So it's not going to automate away your whole job anytime soon. But what it's amazing for is speeding me up and getting me away from the routine work that I didn't want to do anyway. It's giving me more time to spend on the work I do want to do. So we really lean into AI for all these basic things: drafting documentation, cleaning CSVs, writing boilerplate SQL, making basic changes to models, building out simple models from scratch, making first drafts of semantic layers. And it really accelerates getting that work moving. A lot of times it honestly does C+ work, but going from C+ to an A still generally saves us a lot of time. But it's not going to replace us anytime soon. So honestly, that one turned out to feel pretty good. But then I started worrying about my teammates. A year ago, when we were starting to get some real acceleration on analytics engineering workflows, AI analysis was pretty terrible. But recently, as I've started to see the results from newer tools built on top of more recent models, I started to wonder, is AI coming for my analyst friends? Because as we rolled out the notebook agent and then threads, we saw some genuinely amazing things happening. Stakeholders were partnering with the agent and coming back with some really cool analyses. Our head of revenue was digging into what customers did inside the product right before they churned. Our head of product was digging into how customers moved through our pricing tiers and what features were driving those upgrades. Our head of customer support was looking into when tickets were submitted, when we were able to respond, and what that meant for her hiring plan. And these are not simple data questions like what was our revenue last month. These are legitimate analyses. And for the most part, our stakeholders were having really good experiences. So is that it for analysts? So far, it turns out no, not really. We've got our analysts working on more forward-looking work. They're off figuring out how we should think about new parts of our business, how to capture new features and new offerings. And so we can take more well-modeled domains like customer upgrades and let our stakeholders loose. There's still plenty of work for an analyst, and often that work is more interesting than what they were doing before. So then, I thought AI would cause utter chaos, because we unleashed the entire company on our data warehouse and gave them all an agent and said, go crazy. And it became hard to know what was even happening, what people were looking at, let alone whether it was right. Are people going to be out making decisions on data the data team has never even seen? Honestly, this one might be true. LLMs are inherently chaotic. We have all spent years trying to control our data universes with our tidy dbt models and our docs and our roles as intermediary. Now we've got people out doing analyses they don't know how to interpret and deciding whether they're right or wrong without the data team's help. And at their core, LLMs are non-deterministic, so no matter what I do and how hard I try, I can't guarantee that people will get a correct result every time. But honestly, I get things wrong too, and so do my teammates. And while we might have a higher level of accuracy than today's LLMs, we also really slow things down if every question in the company needs to wait for a data person to answer it. Ultimately, relinquishing this control and leaning into the chaos is worth it. Because what I'm actually seeing is that suddenly the data team can deliver on our promises. Self-service is actually happening at Hex. The data team isn't a bottleneck, and our users are getting answers at the speed of the business. And we're finding that sometimes they don't need quite the level of rigor that the data team was providing. Maybe a less complete answer they can get in a few minutes is fine. And in some ways, the experience with the agent is even better than with an analyst. Stakeholders can ask follow-up questions till their heart's content, without frustrating an analyst who thought they were done with that project and just keeps getting pulled back in. And when the agent isn't enough, they reach out to the data team and we work with them and we dig deeper. And this is actually the most exciting part for me. I got into data work because I wanted to help organizations make better decisions. I have been working in data for 15 years. And I've never been able to scale myself or scale my team the way that I'm seeing now. More people are showing up with data than at any point in my career. So while it's a little humbling that a bunch of robots have achieved what I was unable to do, I'm here for it. But then I started to think about what that meant for me. And I thought AI would fundamentally change what analytics engineering is. I'm going from being that critical intermediary between the data and the business to being off on the side somewhere. And I've got all these new things to worry about. What's a rules file? How do semantic layers fit in? What if I sort of hate writing YAML? How do I know what people want to look at if they're not ever asking the data team? There's this whole swirl of context we have to manage. It's hard to know why agents get things wrong. I don't know how to help people get the right answer. We have a lot of levers to pull to help improve results, but it's really hard for me to understand if the changes that I made actually worked. And so we're in this whole new world with these new hard problems, and leaning into it is pretty scary. But maybe this is just a return to the roots of analytics engineering. I got my first data analyst job the year that Redshift, the very first cloud data warehouse, was released. And then there was this explosion of new tooling that unlocked a whole new way of working with data. And we all knew there was a ton of opportunity. But we didn't quite know how it all fit together. So we just tried a bunch of stuff and stuck together tools with duct tape and chewing gum and tried to keep up. And somewhere in there, Michael Kaminsky at Harry's created a new role on his team called the analytics engineer that seems to have caught on. And the analytics engineer was a person who understood the business and how data teams could accelerate outcomes, but who also understood software engineering best practices and could build production quality systems for data teams. They brought this combination of problem solving and rigor and technical skills and a strategic point of view that rolled up into this really interesting generalist role that changed all the time. We were always solving new problems. And then somehow, with all due respect to our hosts, analytics engineering became synonymous with being a DBT developer. And don't get me wrong, I love working in DBT. It's a great tool. It's made my job a lot easier. But if all you're doing is writing DBT models, you're not really living up to the promise of analytics engineering. So I'm kind of excited to look back at the origin of the role and find a new path forward. Because analytics engineering ultimately has always been context engineering. Our jobs are to design systems that provide the information needed to accomplish a task. In our case, it's the task of turning data into insights. So we used to design systems for humans to do that. Analysts, technical stakeholders. Now we have to figure out how to design systems for LLMs to do that. It's a new challenge, but it's the same skill set. We understand how our organizations work and how they should be using data. And we're thinking creatively about how to apply technology to deliver those outcomes. And honestly, it's really hard for humans to use our work. It's hard for people to remember to search the docs so that they understand what that field means. It's hard for a human to intuit how to use a table. It's hard for humans to hold all the business context they need in their head to actually get right answers. Even when I really try, it's a struggle for me to get my work in front of people so they know what resources are available to them. So even when I'm doing a really good job as an analytics engineer, there's only so much impact I can have in improving an individual human's ability to query our data and get the right answer. We say we're building to help our whole organization use data, but in reality, analytics engineers have often just been building things only analysts use anyway. AI agents, though, are the best users of our work. They actually read the docs. I can give them a rules file, and they'll look back at it every time they're writing a query. They'll scroll through all the analyses that exist. They'll note whether I've endorsed it as being particularly relevant. And they'll use that to inform how to use the data in the next analysis. So getting context out of the heads of the data team and into systems that will use that context every single time is such a huge expansion of the impact that we can have. Suddenly, instead of empowering a small number of analysts, we actually are empowering the entire company. And it's not easy because I don't know how all of these things play together yet. We know we're going to need them in one way or another. We don't really know yet how to stitch it all together to get the best outcome for our users. And so one of the things I'm really interested in is building good feedback loops. AI already makes it really easy to ask questions of the data. But how do we, as the data team, see what people are doing, observe the questions that are being asked, understand the patterns in where agents are struggling? That informs how the data team can focus our work and have the biggest impact. Then we engineer some context. We improve the data warehouse. We develop a semantic model. We add context in various ways to the system. And then we test that, and we see, does the agent get the right answer now? And that flows back into stakeholders asking more questions with the help of agents, because ultimately, good quality will drive more demand. And this feedback loop isn't solved in any of the tools that I've seen. It's something that our data team is working really closely with our product and engineering team to figure out. We don't really understand how can you take this mass of questions and distill it into meaningful patterns? How can you decide at scale whether an answer was right? How do you test one type of context or multiple types of context and how they all play together? And so we're back to that chewing gum and duct tape, what can we try, how does it work mode. And it's really fun to work on an unsolved problem, to not have best practices to follow. It's creative in a way that feels like those early days of analytics engineering. And so what we're seeing is that AI brings you a whole team of junior analysts you didn't have before. They're really good at reading lots of docs very fast and answering day-to-day questions with well-modeled data and semantic layers. That lets human analysts act like more senior analysts. And they can focus on higher order work, spend more time with complex methods, less well-formed questions, off-the-rails analyses, new parts of the business. They use AI a lot too to accelerate and stretch themselves. And then analytics engineers are going back to our roots. We're using AI to do the same core work that we've been doing, but faster. And using the rest of our time to tinker with context, experiment with new tools, build new systems. And we're setting up both our AI users and our human users to be more successful. So I'm not gonna lie. I remain somewhat skeptical, and I still have a bit of anxiety about how this is all gonna play out. Not everyone on my team loves this. There are a lot of unknown unknowns. I look at all the ways we're pumping context into the system, and I know we are definitely creating a bunch of tech debt, but I don't know where. It's all gonna change. We are out ahead of the tools, and we've got this unholy witch's brew of DBT docs and rules files and semantic layers. It is definitely not dry. We repeat ourselves all over the place. And the pace of change is accelerating, and it can feel really chaotic to keep up with. But I don't know, I remain optimistic. The tech is changing quickly. It will catch up with us. The problems are interesting. My business context plus that general can-do attitude from the early days of analytics engineering is suddenly really, really helpful again. And I have a whole team of robots that will help me do my work faster and answer my questions and write all my Python. And I have pretty much entirely forgotten Python syntax, which feels pretty good. So I don't think we should be worried. I think we should be optimistic that our businesses can get more answers to more questions. Our teams can work on things that are dynamic and creative and stretch us. And I don't know how it's going to turn out, and we're probably going to do a lot of work that we throw away. But I think it'll be really fun. So let's go forth into this brave world and find out. Thanks. So we've got about 5 minutes if anyone has questions, or I'll do questions after. Yeah?
You mentioned that the AI is like having a whole team of junior analysts. What do you see that as meaning to the role of junior analysts?
Yeah, so the question was, if AI is a junior analyst, what does that mean to a junior analyst? I think the honest truth is that a lot of the things that we have our junior analysts working on, they don't want to work on anyway. It's the classic joke of, I wanted to become a data scientist and all I do is clean data. If you can get people away from the constant QQs and all the distractions in Slack, a junior analyst is just as capable at working on these higher order questions. It's never the methodology that's what's stopping people. It is often the business context. And so the more that is codified and part of a system that doesn't need to be entirely held in your brain, the faster that people can onboard and get to the place where they can use the skills that they brought into the job on day one anyway. Yes?
With how fast everything is changing, how long do you think this assessment of the AI analyst is like a junior analyst, it's going to be something like next year where you're like, oh, it's better than a junior analyst? Is that you've obviously been thinking about this a lot, and you guys are pretty far ahead, so you've got more insight than I do by far. Do you think this is a take for right now, or this is a take for 3 years?
Yeah, so the question is, how long does this sort of prediction last? And the short answer is, I have no idea. And 5 months ago, when Barry made me pitch this talk, I didn't think I was going to feel the way that I do right now. And so I think it will certainly change. I feel pretty confident that none of us are going to see our jobs go away, and that there are going to be as many new challenges created by AI as there are solutions. So while the shape of it might change and what an agent might be able to do might change, I don't think it changes the basic needs of structuring context and governing your data and bringing it to a place where the agents can be successful. And I also don't think that AI can replace a smart analyst who understands the business in terms of the way they can creatively apply methods and work with an agent supporting them as well to answer them. Yeah.
So within your organization, I know there's a lot of different parts that we're experiencing with the semantic layer, agents, the orchestration layer. Something that we've been struggling with is who owns what. And there's been some, tension between teams of like, well, if you're going to own the semantic layer, then what are we doing? And so I'm just curious if you have any insight into what has worked well within your organization.
Yeah. So the answer was sort of within this array of types of context, who owns what and how do we figure that out? And I think the short answer is at Hex, we don't really have super strong lines between what an analyst does and what an analytics engineer does to begin with. So there's definitely, we internally don't have this tension of kind of like ownership. What we generally find is that our analysts are much more likely to define the first way that we want to look at something. So a great example is like, we needed to start looking at the cost of what it takes to provide an agent within our product. And so our analyst went off and figured out, like, how do we actually analyze this? What do we want to know? What are the answers we want to have? And then we're pulling it back to analytics engineering to kind of codify that context in a more meaningful way. And so I think those sorts of handoffs will remain similar, but it's also something that even within our product, we're trying to figure out, like, who will own context? Like, what does that even mean, especially at like a rules file level? Should the data team be the only people who contribute to a rules file when those are just plain English explanations of how the business works, and often the data team is not the closest to that anyway? Should it be that as you're in a chat, when the agent gets something wrong and you correct them, there's like a button to say, like, here's a fact that you need to know. Like, I'm providing you this context, but you should save that somewhere. Everyone in the org should be able to understand that this is, a fact about how we measure marketing. And so I think the answer will be that there's a lot more experimentation before those lines become blurry, and that a lot of orgs will do it different ways, and that a lot of tools will support multiple workflows on that, and that there's some level of context that ends up being version controlled and in your repo and sort of has this data team level of control. And then there will be other things where you want a marketing manager to be able to elevate things to workspace-wide context, or a product manager, or anyone else who just understands how the business works. Yeah.
One of the things that makes me anxious is more sort of like the productivity of the business end and or on business users and stuff there. And like, I feel like I spend a lot of time trying to steer business users towards the right questions and the right metrics. And if, like, I get a lot of questions where I'm like, that's not actually, like, that's an interesting fun fact, and I can answer that for you, but it's not actually going to drive any business results. So, in your experience, did you find that were people asking, I'm sure there was a lot of people who were asking good questions, and people are just sort of distracted these days anyway, that I get nervous about, like, opening the floodgates to people just querying a bunch of stuff that's not important, but they're just curious about.
Yeah, especially with threads, which is like a very quick sort of chat experience. I think I definitely see people asking a lot of kind of those, what as a data person feels like a fun fact, but actually I'm not sure what they're using that for, and it might actually be very relevant to what they're doing today. And so my general take is that at this level, where it is an impermanent asset, it's a sort of one-time inquiry, I really want to default to trusting the business users and know that if they think they need an answer quickly and they think they know how to look at it, they're much closer to the business than I am. And if that will unblock them, that's incredible. And they should go do that. And if it's a bigger question, like, we're launching a whole new business line and we need to align on KPIs that everyone will use and look at consistently and align on, then we partner with the data team. That tends to be a much longer lead time. There's much more sort of discovery, and then there's some build out. And there's a place for both. And, if we're making big decisions, I hope that people still have good judgment and come to the data team and say, I'm making a really important decision or a one-way door decision based on this data. Can you make sure that it's right and that what I did actually made sense and that the conclusions that the agent drew were actually correct? And if it's not that, and if it's like, I'm making this quick decision, we're moving at startup speed, I just need something directional, I'm going to trust you to kind of define that how you want to, as long as the business user is comfortable doing that. Awesome. All right, I'm going to take one more question, and then I'll be up here afterwards as well.
Have you spent much time thinking about the future that some people predict, that AI agents working with AI agents and kind of taking action? We talk about kind of threads, the AI analyst, have you thought much about when the AI analyst is talking to the marketing analyst and adjusting marketing spend?
Yeah, I have not yet thought that far into the future. I'm really excited for AI agents doing really basic things for me. Like I was just having a conversation this morning about the glorious day when we just start scheduling Slack alerts where we're sending Cursor out to go make sure the docs are up to date. Hey Cursor, go look at everything, tell me what's wrong. And a human isn't ever trying to schedule that work. And so I think there's sort of some near-term things that I think will be really exciting. I'm a little nervous about the layers of agents, but who knows what I will be up here pitching next year. Cool. Well, thank you so much. I will hang out up here for a little bit longer, unless they kick me out of the room, but otherwise. Barry has a great talk at 4 that y'all should go to. What room are you in?
I don't know.
Okay, well, you should look up on your schedule. Barry McCardle has another excellent talk coming up.